Hey everyone, this is Mike, and I want to welcome you to a new episode of the Muscle for Life podcast. And in this episode, I am excited because I got to interview Dr. Layne Norton, who you've probably heard of, but just in case you haven't, he is a professional powerlifter, bodybuilding coach, and actually a host of his own podcast, which is called Physique Science Radio. And last but not least, he is someone that's really at the forefront of the whole evidence-based fitness movement and someone whose work I've been following for years now. I've actually had Layne on the podcast before to talk about contest prep, maximizing fat loss, reverse dieting, and a few other topics. And people really liked the interview, so I wanted to get him back on to talk about something else, which is really the bane of weightlifters everywhere, and that is injuries. Now, contrary to common belief, weightlifting isn't nearly as dangerous as many people think it is, and especially when you're using good technique and progressing intelligently and just kind of generally taking good care of your body. But if you lift weights for long enough, you're eventually going to experience at least a minor injury, even if it's only a soft tissue problem stemming from repetitive use. And when something like this does happen, it's really going to frustrate the shit out of you because, as anyone that has gone through it knows and could tell you, it quickly derails your plans and sometimes forces you to train suboptimally for quite some time so you can actually recover and get back to what you want to be doing. So I wanted to get Layne on the show to talk about this subject because as a competitive bodybuilder and powerlifter, he has a lot of experience and wisdom to share on the subject, specifically on preventing and healing both minor and severe injuries. Now, he himself has gotten hurt in ways that most of us probably never will because we're not competitive strength athletes. And so he has also had to go a lot further than most of us ever will into rehab, recovery, and rebuilding his strength and performance, and has learned some pretty important lessons that we can benefit from. So, as you'll see in the interview, Layne covers a lot of ground, ranging from common mistakes that people make that lead to injuries, to simple indicators to watch for that precede injury, how to know if you're fully recovering from your workouts or not, how to rehab and work around injuries, and more. Here's the show. Hey, Layne, it's great to have you back on the show. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate it. We know we're talking about just schedule and how many things there are to do. So I appreciate it. And I really do understand it. So I appreciate, fitting this in.
Yeah, I know. Well, we've been trying to do this for 3 months or something like that, I think.
I know.
Yeah.
The subject I want to talk to you about is something that, for all you listening, if you're not dealing with this right now, there's a good chance you're going to deal with it to one degree or another in the future, and that's injuries. Now, by injuries, it can be ranging from slight, which is just repetitive use kind of stuff, inflammation in areas doesn't feel right, to more severe stuff that can require medical treatment of some kind, or dramatically changing your training and so forth. And the reason why I wanted to talk to you about that, Layne, is because I know over the last year and a half or so you've gone through a bit of this yourself, and I think that you'll have some great insights to share with everybody, both from the perspective of preventative, even if there were things that, maybe you didn't even do anything necessarily wrong, but just in educating people at that point, because, for everybody listening, when you're new to weightlifting and you're just on a barbell strength training program, if you learn basic form and you're just not stupid and you pay attention, you're not really moving around enough weight in the beginning usually to run much of a risk of anything serious happening. But once you kind of become a more intermediate and then advanced weightlifter, when you start pulling hundreds and hundreds of pounds or squatting hundreds and hundreds of pounds, pushing a lot of weight, it doesn't take very much in a moment to either cause an injury that is acutely painful, or to start something like that. Now there was something a little bit off, and now 3 months from now, if you keep going in the same way, you're really going to feel it. So that's what I thought would be for today's talk.
Yeah, I mean, people, well, not that they love the injury stuff, but everybody, if you lift weights long enough, you are going to deal with this. I mean, that's not me being doom and gloom. It's just the facts.
Yeah.
And
you can kind of say that about any sport, right? I mean, if you play any sport enough.
Yeah. That's why, I had people when I got injured say, "Oh, see, Layne doesn't know how to lift. He And it's like, well, Tiger Woods, all he does is swing a golf club, and his back's jacked up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
and his knee and
everything. You can be a recreational person and like kind of go easy at it, not really push yourself, and you can be in decent shape, and that's fine. But if you want to be competitive at like high levels, I mean, high level athletes get injured. I mean, I know people can point to people like, you know, Brett Favre or Cal Ripken, or people who like played a long career and never, you know, had an injury break. But I mean, if you talk to Cal Ripken afterwards, like I think he even said in interviews, like there were days that he had no business playing, like he should not have been playing, and he probably actually hurt his team by playing. But at a certain point, the record became so important that they put him out there anyway. You know, and but yeah, it's just like there's a reason why like very few people make it through a season without any kind of one break or some kind of nagging injury getting them. You know, so I think it's a pretty unrealistic expectation for people to come into and say, well, I won't get injured. Like it's going to happen.
Yeah.
What matters,
especially if your goal, I think, is to achieve any respectable level of whole body strength, and it's just the amount of work and that it's going to take to get there. I mean, maybe you can be an outlier and maybe you won't really run into anything, but if you're kind of in the middle of that curve, there's going to be something. I mean, I myself have run into little things, nothing major, but, you know, some biceps tendonitis and, you know, a few things that I had to address. Like I saw a physical therapist and worked through and changed my training because I didn't want it to turn into something worse, you know?
Yeah, well, and you're going to kind of have this line of, you know, like your injury risk is going to be like kind of here, or only like kind of, I can't do my hands with it, but it's going to be like kind of here.
Yeah.
Your strength is going to be going up, and then at a certain point, they're going to go like this.
Yeah.
Right? So because once you get to a certain point of strength, and musculature, your ability to make progress is going to slow way down, and it's going to require a disproportionate amount of work to get a little bit of strength or progress back.
Yep.
So that you're always going to be butting up against that. Okay, work so hard that you can make some progress, but not so much that it causes you to be injured.
Right. And that can be just one of those things of, are you going to go for that PR today or not? Or are you going to, whether it be, you know, if you're doing heavy 1 or 2 rep stuff, or even if it's higher rep, but I mean, it's just that point where you're going to have to push yourself outside. If you're staying within your comfort zone, that can work in the beginning, but there's a point where now there's no more adaptation. Yeah,
exactly. Like, and that's the point is, if you are going to want to progress past a certain point, you have to push yourself past that point. I mean, it's. I know there are people out there who say, "Oh, you just do 1 set to failure, or you can just do low volume." Or it just the plethora of scientific data we have, as well as the anecdotal of what you see becoming elite, very much argues with that. Mm-hmm. You know, like most people who, you know, build a lot of muscle or build a lot of strength, they do a lot of work. Yeah. You know, there's a lot of training involved in terms of just time invested, you know, and it's not always the case, but especially with people who are drug free. Like, if you're drug free, you're just not going to build. You're not going to optimize your muscle mass by doing very low volume. Like, it's not going to happen. Right. And so you're gonna run it like every time you get under the bar,
or low intensity, right?
Yeah. So every time you get under the bar, there's a probability you can get injured, and the more times you get under that bar, the chances it's going to happen go up. Yep. So yeah, it's you know, I would say I've had a pretty average career injury wise, in that, you know, I've lifted really hard for about 15 years, and I've had, I think, like 4 major injuries, I would say. And yeah, so I would, you know, an injury like that every 3 to 4 years, I think, is pretty reasonable. But, you know, some people would say that's injury prone. I tend to think that it's pretty much average. A lot of them have occurred later in my career, you know, and part of that's probably 2 things. I'm 35 now. I probably don't recover quite as well as I did when I was younger. Mm-hmm. And 2, just because I'm at that advanced level, it takes so much work to get past that whenever I start doing that much work, like there's been no powerlifting meet I've gone into in the last 5 years where I didn't have something that was bothering me, like whether it was a tight hamstring or it was my lower back was acting up, or my shoulder was giving me problems, or whatever it is. Like there was always something. So I think people have this false idea that like they're gonna go, lift crazy heavy, go to a powerlifting meet and feel amazing. And it's like, you talk to MMA fighters. MMA fighters are like, yeah, funny thing, to get ready for a fight, you need to fight. But when you fight, you get hurt. Yeah. So, like, it's about...
I think it's common among all sports, really. Everybody, it's like one of those little sports cliches, everyone plays hurt, like suck it up kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. Right. Like I can handle pain or nagging inflammation, that kind of stuff. That's all stuff you can work around, work through it. But when you're actually hurt, or when you're actually injured, that's when it really sucks.
Right. So to that point, do you want to quickly? Well, I think we should start with some preventative, maybe common mistakes that you see people that are not as experienced as you are, that lead to. So they move through the hurt phase, they're moving and they don't address it correctly, and then that leads to an injury, as opposed to the freak injury that like where did that come from?
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely. I've had both. Where it was like I had something on and off, and I didn't really address it, and then it became a big deal. And I also had something just out of left field. I think the biggest thing is like, honestly, I think one of the biggest services people could do themselves is go see a sport-specific physical therapist, like before they get hurt, and have them just look at your movements, know? Because I learned so much going to my friend Jamie Alhambra here in Tampa. Like, there were so many things she just picked out from one session that I'd never even thought about, and...
I had a similar experience with a guy named Rob Collowine. He's in Clearwater. You might find him interesting. He's 37 years. He was a professional soccer player before. Super smart guy, very sharp. Same thing. It was a couple months ago where he exactly what you're talking about. He showed a couple structural things that were off that were leading to, because I tend to get tightness in the bicipital groove in my right side, and he was able to look at. Anyway, so there was what I found interesting about him is he also could demonstrate it to me. He wasn't one just going to treat the inflammation. He was able to show me some underlying causes, like, okay, look, your collarbone doesn't have a full range of motion. It's supposed to be able to do this. It can't do this. Watch. So here, if your collarbone, put your arm in this position. It's supposed to be here. He'd press it down, but it's not. And so he would say, resist my arm, and I couldn't. And it's just weakness, right? And he said, okay, look, if I depress your collarbone, if I push it down into the position it's supposed to be in, watch. Then now strong. And so he was able to point out a few things and then address it with just some, almost like ART basically. Just digging into it, uncomfortable, but it worked. I mean, it immediately helped. So I think that's a great tip where I wish, I would have done that really honestly probably in the beginning, and then because I grew up playing sports, playing ice hockey and stuff. I've had tightness up here. I can remember it at 15 years old.
Yeah.
So this is something that maybe it finally kind of hit me now, but it could have been addressed a long time ago.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, going into Jamie worked more with me on like movement patterns. Okay. She's like, She's like, you activate your core, but you're just activating your abdominals. You're not activating your obliques.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I think you activate your obliques when you squat, because that's going to give you, side-to-side control. Mm. And we worked on that. We worked on a lot of other things, in terms of hip stuff. She just changed, I always had hip shift on squat, so I would shift to the left when I would squat.
I tend to do that too.
Squat. And, she just had me like close off my stance a little bit, like put my feet more forward, and do some glute activation exercises, and boom, like within 2 weeks it was gone.
Wow.
And I was just like, God, like how, and I like at the time I couldn't even squat 135 with my hip injury. I couldn't squat 135 without like an 8 out of 10 pain,
Wow.
you know. And I had 2 cortisone shots. I had high dose, like 2,400 milligrams of ibuprofen a day, like all kinds of stuff, and nothing touched it, you know. And just going to her for 2 weeks, I was able to put 135 on the bar and not have pain.
Wow.
Which I thought was pretty incredible.
Yeah.
And it was just changing the way I moved, you know. Like, unfortunately, people kind of want the, like, okay, like, give me the pill or give me the shot.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and I was guilty of that to a certain extent. And we were even, like, they thought I had bursitis, which now I'm pretty sure I didn't have bursitis. And they were talking about, like, oh, yeah, let's do a bursectomy and take your bursa sac out. And, like,
Yeah.
and I started thinking, I'm like, all right, well, if it comes to that, okay. But I'm like, maybe I should get a second opinion before I go pulling stuff out of me. You know what I mean? Like, that, if that's inflamed, yeah, it could make a difference, make me feel better. But, you know, that's also there for a reason. So I'd rather not take it out if I don't have to.
Yeah,
you know?
and probably I think just avoiding surgeries, if at all possible, is smart, because talking about probabilities, I mean, there's a non-zero chance when you get put under that you don't come back. I mean, it's a real thing. I mean, not to be morbid, but that's one of those things.
No, it happens. Yeah. It happens every year, and well, not even that. Like if you look at like lower back surgeries, they have a horrible success rate, like absolutely horrible. Most people. I'm regurgitating this from Dr. Stuart McGill, but I read his book called The Back Mechanic. And he said that the majority of people, they don't actually improve from back surgery. What happens is they're forced to take 12 weeks of not using their lower back, and then they have to do the rehabilitation work. And so they get better, but they think it was the surgery, when in reality, if they'd just taken 12 weeks off and done the rehabilitation work, they would have gotten the same outcome.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, there are some cases where you need back surgery, like would be like if you've got like some kind of, you know, herniated disc where it's cutting off the nerve supply and you're risking permanent nerve damage.
Right.
Like that's a big deal. You've got to fix that,
right.
You know. But, yeah, like most times when people get back or like any kind of spinal surgery, you know, it's kind of because I herniated 2 discs in my neck when I was younger playing rugby. And, you know, they're like, oh, we can do surgery, can fuse the discs together. But the surgeon was like, it's just you're going to have the same problem in a few years. Like in 10, 20 years, you'll have the same problem. He's like, try physical therapy first. And did that. And within 6 months, like I was back, you know. So, yeah, it's just, you know, I'm not trying to say, like, for example, some people are so against surgery that it's insane, you know, like. Right. I remember I tore my pec. Like I tore my pec full thickness tear inside the muscle.
Wow.
And I had people saying, "Oh, just get like ART or you know do like electrical stim or whatever." I'm like, no, like the muscle's not.
No, you need to reattach that. Like
pull itself back up to the tendon. Like that. No, that's not how it works. You know, like that needs to be fixed. Yeah. Otherwise, there's always going to be a deformity there. Yeah. You know.
Yeah.
But yeah, like some other thing, you know, like an ACL tear, like that's just not going to fix itself.
Absolutely.
You know, you have to get that fixed.
Totally.
But you know, things that are inflammatory in nature, or you know, some kind of strain or pull or whatever, you know, a lot of times physical therapy can solve that. And in the case of like, you know, discs in your back, like I said, at least from my understanding of things, when you get a disc fusion, you're not really solving the problem. You're just kind of alleviating the symptoms for a period of time, and then they're going to come back anyway.
Yeah. So what's the point? Might as well try something
and
else.
most Americans too, from the data I've seen, like I think something like 60% of Americans have disc herniations. After the age of 35, 60% have disc herniations in their lower back. They're just asymptomatic. Yeah. Like because if it's not pressing on a nerve, you won't feel it.
Yeah,
you know?
I remember reading about that because I had written an article about lower back stuff and came across that.
Yeah, so, you know, I definitely would tell people, like, try to get physical therapy first and find someone who works with athletes. And if you can find somebody who works with specifically what you do, like Jamie, she's a weightlifter herself, right? So she does Olympic lifting and powerlifting. So, like, it was nice to have somebody who was not going to be like, oh, we'll just stop lifting weights. You know, it was nice to have somebody who was looking at it from the perspective of he's going to lift weights whether I like it or not. And so we need to get him in a place where he's lifting weights as safely as possible.
Right.
And that was the same, like the guy who did my pec tear surgery, he was the same way. Like he was actually kind of a meathead, which was great.
Yeah.
And he was a great surgeon. Man, huge. If you're in the Midwest and you need any kind of orthopedic surgery, Dr. Michael Corcoran at Orthopedics in Kankakee, Illinois, cannot recommend him enough for anything in the shoulder area. Like amazing. Like you can't even like the judges 2 years later, like when I was competing, they were trying to pick out which pec I had torn. They couldn't figure it out. Didn't know which one it was.
Wow.
I just got a little tiny scar. So, when it comes to that stuff, like if you got to get surgery, find the best person. I mean, I realize insurance comes in and everything, but don't just like necessarily take the first referral. Like find in your area, like who do the pro sports teams go to?
Yes. Like
who's their best guy? You know what I mean? Like I consider going to Dr. James Andrews because he does a lot of that stuff, Yeah, but you got to find, if this is really important to you, especially if your insurance covers it, find the best person. Like get the best help you can, because there's a reason that they're the leaders in their field. There's a reason the pro sports teams who print money have chosen them to do it. Like this Michael Corcoran, he was the surgeon for the Chicago Bears. In fact, most of the pec tears he'd done previous to that were on NFL football players. They get pec tears from like reaching out, trying to grab somebody and tackle. Like
makes sense.
Actually, what you find out, most muscle tears aren't from like tension, like the amount of weight is from stretch. Like somebody just stretches really quick, and that's what causes it to tear. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yeah, that's how I found. I've worked with a couple physical therapists, and that was exactly what I did. So, who do the professional teams around here? Who do they go and see for stuff? Because I figured. So I worked with one guy he worked with professional baseball players and also with Olympic weightlifters, actually.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, because I know this guy has to be able to get results, or they just get someone else who can. So.
Exactly. Yeah, athletes aren't the most patient people in the world. So.
Exactly.
Sports teams, they're trotting people out there, NFL teams who have no business being out there in the field, and somehow
they still perform.
They're able to patch them together enough to perform. Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Totally, I agree. So back to so let's look at preventative here. So what are some of the signs and symptoms that people, because something I get asked about is what's the difference between just something that's uncomfortable but you just keep pushing and that's what you should do versus okay, this is pain that is indicating that something is wrong, and you shouldn't try to push through that. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to make any major changes, but it might just mean for this workout right now, there's something going on that it would be smarter to back off it, either less weight or just try a different exercise or whatever.
Yeah, at least from my conversations with physical therapists, and again, I'm not an expert on injuries. This is just what I've talked about. If you have something that's more than a 4 out of 10 pain that persists for more than a couple weeks, you need to get it looked at. Mm-hmm. It's not going to resolve itself on its own. Now, if you got something that's nagging, like, our bicep tendonitis, like we both probably have a similar thing where mine feels like there's something wrong with my shoulder, but it's actually my bicep is inflamed. Like that bothers me, but it's like a 2 or 3 out of 10. It's just very annoying, and it's when I bench press. So that's exactly how I. Do I not need to stop training? Probably not, but just trying to work around it.
Yep.
And then doing any kind of rehab exercises to try to strengthen the area and make space in that groove.
Yep. That's exactly what I went through. So what worked well for me was sticking with dumbbells for a little bit, getting off the barbell, and then doing some ART. And then also I saw this other PT that helped me with some structural. It's like some interesting shit that basically was one part of my diaphragm wasn't contracting the way that it should, which then causes core instability. And that actually, funny enough, why that is when I was a teenager for like 1 year, I was on the computer a lot. Like I was in school, whatever, but I'd play this video game at night, right? And I would sit on my chair with my right leg up, and I would just have my body resting against it. So the right side of my diaphragm would just always be in this compacted position and not able to actually. Yep. And from that point on, I would sometimes get when I would be skating and shit, playing hockey, I would get some discomfort in the right side of my diaphragm, and it's always been like that since. And so I wasn't surprised when he was like, "Oh yeah, I mean, this is this part of your," and he was able to demonstrate it to me in terms of balance. So like he would just put my feet in a position, and I had he's like, "Don't let me push you over." And from this side, the side of my diaphragm just wasn't contracting correctly. It would prevent my core from contracting correctly. And then the other side, you'd say, see, the difference here is, okay, other side, and I was totally stable. And so for that, he like got a rubber wedge and dug into my diaphragm, which was pretty uncomfortable, but just like bringing it alive, like, come on, work, right? And then that was it. And he was okay, watch. And then now in the same position, I could feel now my core contracting and stabilizing me, so he couldn't push me over. So it's
pretty wild, isn't it?
I know.
Yeah, like that's the same thing with Jamie just showed me some of these, banded exercise or whatever. I'm thinking this isn't going to do anything, and then 2 weeks later I can actually squat again. And it's like, okay, well, I guess they have a doctorate in this for a reason.
Yeah. And especially if you're not used to it, because you're used to like pushing, pulling, squatting heavy weight, and then so now you're playing around with rubber bands is what it feels like. But
yeah, exactly. Well, I did like that. Like she was having me do like some stiff or some Romanian deadlifts, single leg Romanian deadlifts, and I went to grab the 10-pound dumbbells, and she was like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Grab the 50." She's like, "That's not going to do anything for you." I was like, "Oh, okay, all right." So. Like usually, when I think of PTs, I'm thinking like pink dumbbells and weird exercises and No, she actually had me like lift weights, Yeah. So
that's good.
That was good, but yeah.
And anything else from a preventative perspective, even relating maybe to form and technique, progression? Any lessons you've learned?
Yeah, I mean, technique is huge. Learning, especially with major exercises, learning how to engage your core properly. Mm-hmm. Like your core is what protects your spine. People, for squat and deadlift, they give the cue for you to arch your lower back. Well, arching your lower back doesn't do anything if you're not bracing your core. Mm-hmm. Like your core is actually what protects your spine. It's your body's natural belt. Mm-hmm. So learning how to do that is a huge thing. Learning how to, on pressing exercises like retracting your scapula, those sorts of things, and not getting over protracted, Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of different things, and then also mobility work. Like I neglected mobility work for years, and now I do quite a bit of it, because I'm trying to make up for all those years of neglecting it.
Yeah, I have a little routine as well that now I do it twice a week.
Yeah, like doing some dynamic stretching and mobility work before you train, and then if you need some static stretching, doing that after you train, and just also being smart with when you train. Like some days I wish I could go back and be like, dude, you don't have it today. Mm-hmm. Take 5% off and just get your volume in and then get out, But unfortunately but it is that mentality that makes you really good at something, the push.
Yep.
It also gets you in trouble. But if you don't have that mentality, maybe you never get to that level. So it is a really tough balancing act,
because you're wondering, is this a psychological, am I tricking myself, or am I actually, in a sense, understanding my body and just sensing this doesn't feel right and I should just back off. It can be hard to know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very fine line, and there's usually not a defined here to tell you what to do. So I do think in the future we're going to have, more metrics to where we can tell, like bar velocity devices, for example. Mm-hmm. Like, you can tell, that's 80% of your max, but that only moved at a 0.2 meters per second, or usually it moves 0.28. Like, you don't have it today. Let's back off a little bit, you know? Like some objective markers as opposed to just like a perceptive like RPE scale, those sorts of things, Although RPE can be really useful, I really like objective measurements because, for example, like me, I'm such a slow, like grinding squatter, for example. I will always perceive a high level of effort, even on something that's relatively light, So using the RPE scale for me is very difficult because if I do like an 8 RPE feels really heavy to me. Whereas other people are like, oh yeah, 8 RPE, no big deal. I'm like, man, that's 8 RPE is really hard, So
I have the same thing with squatting in particular. I mean, I'm not. I've never been nearly as strong as you are, But I've run into the same thing where even going through warm-ups and stuff where I just by RPE, I'm thinking like this is gonna suck when I start adding weight. But actually, it plays out fine. And I'm able to do exactly what I wanted to do. It just felt like it's way fucking harder than the RPE seemed disproportionately high for what I was actually capable of doing that day.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I like I said, that's pretty much me every day. Like we actually had the velocity device one day, and I was like, compared to other lifters who were much lower than me in terms of skill level or strength, all of them were squatting 135, 225, 315 faster than I was. You know,
interesting.
Like, yeah, even up to like 350, they were all still faster than me. It wasn't until it got to like 405, 450, that sort of thing, like basically to where they couldn't do it anymore before I was faster than them. You know. So yeah, like I always perceived that high level of effort.
You think that's just technique, or you think it's just more anatomy for you, how biomechanics?
I think probably a little bit of biomechanics more so, just because I'm so long. My legs are so long that I have such a long squat stroke. Like if you look at how far the bar actually has to travel for me to get to parallel versus other people, it's disgusting. I know. You know, so
I have the same long femurs. Have fun squatting. Also, I have long arms. Have fun pressing.
Oh yeah, good deadlifter though, probably.
Yeah. That's been my best.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all I got.
I always say powerlifting is pretty fair because if you got one thing, usually you got something else is better. Like
it's true.
But that's why the best powerlifters are, relatively short femur, pretty long shin, long arms for deadlifting, but long proportionately in the forearm and very short in the upper arm, because the upper arm is the part you have to clear for bench press.
Yeah.
So, like, if you've ever seen Ed Cohn, who's one of the, if not the greatest powerlifter of all time, he looks like he has gorilla forearms. Yeah. I mean, they look stupid. They're so long. Like, his hands hang down by his knees,
But his biceps end up here.
Yes, like his upper arm is very, very, he actually looks really weird if you see him. I love Ed Cohn. He's a super sweet guy.
Yeah.
But he looks really weird if you see him in person, like, because he's got these super long arms, but they're all from here down, He
just built for weightlifting. I mean, that's like...
exactly. He did have a little bit longer femur than probably your optimal squatter, but he was just his lower back was just so damn strong it didn't matter, So yeah, it's definitely like it's interesting to see who the best lifters are. Like Christoph Wiesbecki, I may be saying his name wrong, but he's the current 231 pound IPF world record holder. Like I think he deadlifted something like 865 at 231. Wow. Drug free, and like if you look where his lockout is barely above his knees. Like it barely has to clear his knees. And then he still bench presses like in the mid fours. Wow. It's pretty insane.
That is insane. What about things related to recovery? So, because there's a lot of talk and a lot of speculation on just overtraining and what is overtraining, even is it even real, blah blah blah. We don't have to dive into that per se, but I think recovery is something that's a bit more it's a bit easier to talk about, and there are definitely symptoms. I mean, and I know this just from talking with people, that symptoms of where they're not like let's say they haven't deloaded in a while. There's a point where we all get there. If you push yourself, there are things you can objectively. Well, it is subjective, but it's pretty obvious. You can go, cool, this is what I'm, even if you're not looking at heart rate variability, if you're not getting fancy about it, point where you're like, I'm no longer, I need to take a break. I need to, take a week off or deload for a week, or, I'm just not recovering. Maybe it's not sleeping enough. The reason why could be something else, but anything to add on that in terms of just symptoms of under recovering?
I think if you're always having high RPEs, very high rate of perceived effort, even with weights that you should be relatively easy. I think if you're getting some decrements in strength, even though your training volume is high, if you're like soreness that just kind of rolls from one workout into another, and doesn't seem to have any kind of catch up. If you're feeling worn down constantly. But all those are very subjective, There was somebody posted something the other day. They were like, do you feel like your physique looks better in the morning? Do you get tired in the mid-afternoon? Do you feel like you're dragging through the day, this and that? And then Bobin said, good, you're normal. Like that, like you should feel that way. That's how most people feel.
Right.
Like it doesn't mean you have adrenal fatigue
right.
or all these other, things that people make up.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, because at a certain point, like, I had somebody like, oh yeah, I've just been training really hard and I'm tired all the time, this and that. And I'm like, well, couldn't you just be tired all the time because you're training really hard?
Yeah.
Like, has that ever crossed your mind? You know?
Yeah.
So it's, people say, oh, when you exercise, you have so much energy. And it's like, well, yeah, I think if you're like recreationally exercising.
I think the keyword there is exercise. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you're not like doing like a
training.
12-week overreaching. Yeah, training. There's a difference between exercise and training,
right.
Like, when you're doing like a 12-week overreaching powerlifting cycle, like you are going to feel like garbage by the end. Like it's going to suck. Like I remember 3 weeks out from Raw Nationals in 2014, I was supposed to go in and do like deadlift singles with 660, and my best pull is 705. So really, it's going to be difficult, but it shouldn't be that bad. And it was like the most awful experience I've ever had in the gym. Like it was taking me like 5 seconds for the bar to break the floor. Like it was just, it was taking me like 15 minutes in between each single because I was just like having to be like, come on, like it was just so terrible feeling,
Yeah.
But then I got to the meet and I did great, because you taper like when you, and that's the point is like overreaching is different than overtraining. Overtraining is a chronic condition.
As far as I know, is hard to really do. I mean, it's
really hard. Most people who lift weights are not going to get there because it's people who do that are like triathletes and people who just train with enormous amounts of training volume.
Yeah.
Us weightlifters like to think we're tough, but at the end of the day, like
that's a good point.
You're in the gym like an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours.
Yeah, resting half the time is resting.
Yeah,
anyway.
More than half the time is resting.
Yeah.
These guys are training like all day. You know what I mean? And it's just, I think, and the notion that you can overtrain to the point where you have like, where it causes you to lose muscle mass, that's just never been shown.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just never been shown, never been demonstrated. I think you can start to see performance decrements where your strength goes down in the short term.
Yeah.
But like I said, for powerlifting, we like purposely do that. We like purposely overtrain or overreach. And then a week away from the meet, we taper and we super compensate, and you get it's like a rubber band effect.
Mm-hmm.
It's just understanding the differences between I feel a little bad, versus just chronically being beaten down.
Yeah. And to that point, just to everybody listening, I mean, in terms of deloading and frequency and so forth, it kind of depends how you're training. But if you're training like if you're kind of on a strength program or at least maybe a hybrid program, me personally, I find that if I deload every 6 to 8 weeks, that keeps me. Sometimes I find I probably could go longer, but that's what I do personally, and I never run into. I mean, sometimes by that 6th or 8th week, I'm noticing like what you're talking about, Layne, where what I notice is that the weight that I normally would be, what I'm working with starts to feel very heavy. That's one of the first things that I notice, and abnormally so. And so everybody listening, that's what I do personally. Every 6 to 8 weeks, I kind of try to preempt it a little bit. I just find that for my body that tends to work well, and that keeps me progressing, and I don't dig myself into a hole if I do that.
Yeah, I mean, I probably push it a little bit past where I should, but that's I compete in powerlifting and whatnot. Like that's.
I'm just an Instagram model. I'm not a real.
Yeah, if you're just looking to get stronger and not do that, then you're probably better off preemptively doing it because it reduces your injury risk.
Yeah.
So when you're sore and you're tight and you can't move as well, because you're a little overreached, like that's when that's better or worse chance for an injury to occur.
Right. Yeah. Okay, good. So I think that's at least those are the major points in terms of preventative. Is there anything else that I didn't think of, or that you feel it should be touched on?
Not really. Just pay attention.
Yeah. Okay, good.
And don't try to say, oh, that probably won't matter. It's probably going to matter.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so now let's shift gears to, and this is where what you've been dealing with in the last year and a half or so is going to be very relevant. So an injury has occurred, and this isn't discomfort, this is an actual injury. How have you gone about working around it? And even, I just know, again, from talking to people, even having it explained that it's not just because you got hurt doesn't, again, like you were saying, if we look at it statistically, if you do this for long enough, something is going to happen.
Right.
You don't have to go in the gym every day thinking about it, but just, the point is, it doesn't necessarily mean that you were being stupid or doing anything particularly wrong.
Sometimes shit just happens.
Exactly. So there's don't get down on yourself of like, oh, I fucked this up and it's just because I'm bad at this or whatever. So there's that is encouraging, just to know, okay, so this happened and shouldn't be particularly surprised that this happened. Maybe even you could have done something to prevent it from happening. Okay, fine. But now going from here, you talked a bit about what has helped in terms of seeing a good sports doctor, which I think is great advice. But now in the gym, how have you kind of worked around some of the injuries that you've run into? And are there any kind of like general lessons that can be kind of...
I try to look for exercises that I can substitute that are close, that will allow me to maintain more of my adaptation, more of my strength, more of my muscle.
Mm-hmm. And how has that played out specifically? Because so you've run into some hip issues, some
lower back,
and
cervical spine. Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, like with squatting in particular, like when I was getting ready for Worlds in 2015, like 12 weeks out, I really started having some lower back issues, and I kept trying to work through them. And it just got to the point where I just couldn't work through them anymore. And I decided to take 3 weeks off of squats, and I just did leg press, because leg press did not aggravate my lower back injury. Was leg press as good as squats? No, but it was better than doing nothing. Mm-hmm. So I did leg press for 3 weeks, with the same or similar volume and intensity as I would on squatting. And, when I went back to squatting, yes, I was weaker, but I hadn't lost that much. Mm-hmm. So by substituting that exercise, I was able to keep more of my adaptation. But my rule is, like, if there's any pain after like an actual acute injury, if I try to substitute something and there's any pain, I don't do it.
Fine. Yeah.
Like
find something you want, something that just feels good. That's what you're looking for.
When I tore my pec and I had it repaired and everything, you better believe I wasn't in there being like, oh, I can probably do some pec flies or whatever. Like, no way. Like, I didn't even. Yeah. You baby that thing, But like the hip injury, like I tried to keep squatting, and it was just any hip movement at all, leg press, whatever. It didn't matter. Like that just hurt. The only thing that didn't hurt was leg extensions and leg curls, so I did leg extensions and leg curls.
Yeah. I was going to ask on that for the squatting. Did you also add some hamstring stuff in that didn't bother you?
Yeah. So and then like glute ham raises, those sorts of things. Yeah. I did a lot of good mornings. Because that's a little bit, well, if you talk to the internet, that's what I do anyway for squats. So, but that's at least
because you're low bar.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, same. No, I know. That's just what's comfortable to me. I don't know. So I've had people like, oh, what the fuck? Why are you so hunched over? Like, look at my shoulders and my hips. They're rising at the same. That's just how I squat.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm fucking tall and I like the bar low. What do you want from me?
Yeah, well, like that's the thing. Like people say, well, why don't you high bar squat? Because you can be more upright. I always have to lean forward. If I high bar squat, because now my fulcrum's longer, like I just fold over.
Same.
Like I just completely fold.
That's exactly what happens to me.
Yeah. So if low bar squat, just by moving it down a few inches, I start out more forward, but I'm able to maintain that position.
Same.
It's just much more comfortable for me. And, people, I always say, I'm unaware of any good morning where the hips go below the knees, but if you ever find one, let me know, so, but, it's, that's another thing is finding the technique that works for you. I injured my lower back much more often when I was high bar squatting, and then when I went to low bar, it was much better. I was able to lift more weight. So, finding technique that works for you and, understanding that, you're an individual. Your body type in terms of your structure is an individual, and you should try to find what is most comfortable. And that goes right down to like the shoes you wear, the belt you wear if you wear a belt, whatever it is. Like find what you're most comfortable in.
Yep. Yep. It's a good point. I mean, I found that squat shoes makes quite a difference for me.
Huge difference.
It makes it, yeah. I mean, I'm immediately, I don't know, 10% stronger, just because I feel so much more stable. And I was surprised when I first made that switch. I was like, wow, I would not have expected that actually.
Yeah, what kind do you use?
Adidas, just Adi Powers.
Yeah, the Adi Powers, yeah. So a little bit more aggressive heel, but yeah, those like your feet feel like you're poured into concrete.
Yep.
You know, like they're so stable.
Yeah, and you can really torque and dig them into the ground. I like it.
Oh yeah, and if people out there have never like squatted in an actual pair of shoes that's meant for squatting, and you do it, you'll just be absolutely blown away by the difference.
Yep.
Like, you will never squat in anything else again.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, actually, first time I was sold, I was like, well, I'm never squatting in anything else other than this.
Yeah, I had a really interesting debate with Joe Donnelly on Twitter, and we actually usually get along, but he said, well, I'm an athlete. I squat in, my sneakers or whatever. And I said, okay, well, you played NFL football. Did you play NFL football in sneakers? He didn't really have a comeback to that. Like
no, you played in the shoes that are good for football.
Right, exactly. You're going to play in spikes because you've got more control, and that's what makes sense for football. You're not playing in sneakers, right?
Yeah.
Well, same thing for lifting weights. Like, why would I not use the foot attire that is most
suitable to what you're doing? I mean, it's like
I wouldn't play basketball in my squat shoes. I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
But but I would squat in them. So
totally.
For sure.
And regarding form, also one thing, or not form, but finding what works best for you. I think if you want to just quickly talk about, just as a quick aside, deadlifting, because I guess I don't know why sumo deadlifting has become like a thing. Like everybody, it's like you're cool if you're sumo deadlifting, and you're somehow like, you're just not really, you're not up to speed if you're just.
Well, it's funny because for a while there, everybody said sumo was cheating. Yeah. Like, oh, you do cheater sumo,
I mean, I think, I don't know, maybe my guess is you have like some of these random like, Instagram, YouTube people, a few of them, I think, sumo, and it became a thing, that sumo is the way to go. Well, it does
look cooler when you approach the bar and it kind of looks more badass.
Yeah, and you're all like, oh.
Yeah, exactly. But, no, I mean, some people are going to be better conventional pullers and some people are going to be better sumo pullers. And that's, the people that say sumo is cheating because it's a shorter range of motion. If sumo was inherently easier, every person at a powerlifting meet would pull sumo. Yeah. Nobody is going to handicap themselves. Like, that is just not going to happen. Yeah. Benedict Magnuson did not pull conventional and pull 1,015 pounds because he was like, oh, I want to show how much even more badass I am by pulling conventional. No, it's because he was stronger that way, know?
And that kind of just comes down again to how your body's built, right?
Yeah. Like what muscles of yours are stronger? If you're more posterior chain dominant and and you're longer arm, then probably conventional is going to be something that's good for you. If you're a little more quad dominant, quad and hip and a little bit shorter arms, you're probably going to be better at sumo.
Yeah.
Well, me personally, I'm about the same at both. Like I've pulled 700 conventional. And my best pull sumo in the gym is 715. Wow. So, I'm about the same.
What do you prefer?
I prefer sumo, just because it's my lower back is a little more upright, and I tend to not have as many soft tissue injuries with sumo as I do with conventional. Okay. But I mean, again, it's not that one's better than the other. Like they both have advantages and disadvantages. I mean, if you were going to do a standing high jump, you wouldn't spread your legs as wide as possible and then try to jump, right? Sure. You would put both feet under you and you would jump. Yep. So when you're in a conventional position with both feet under you, you have much more power you can generate. Well, but you have to pull the bar further.
Yes.
Sumo, it's a shorter range of motion, but you have much less power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it just depends on like try both. Figure out what works better for you.
Yeah. I mean, that's been my advice to people is find what's most comfortable and what are you strongest at. Like if you do better at one or the other and it feels good, then just do that.
Exactly.
Okay, so back to you mentioned when you had the hip issue. So I assume that meant no deadlifting for some period of time as well, and you were working around that, or? I actually was able to deadlift for the most part. Sumo was a little uncomfortable, but I was able to conventional deadlift with pretty much no pain. Okay. I did have one day where like it acted up on me, but other than that, like pretty much no pain for conventional. So I did like a lot of actual conventional deadlifting during that time. I see. And if you would have had to drop, pulling from your routine, how would you, and this is something I get asked fairly frequently, because there's not some simple, like, sure, if you can go from a squat to a leg press and like you were saying, it'll do a pretty good job maintaining things, but it's not as easy with deadlifting. It's not just like, just go do this one.
I would say probably like a barbell hip thrust, and then some kind of direct low back work in terms
like a
of
good morning.
Exactly. Yeah. So you're gonna get pretty close. So like with a hip injury, you could do a good morning, and you could probably do a hip thrust. So like those would be, you'd be getting like activating quite a few of the same muscles, because it's basically like the same movement cut in two,
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, like the best thing is if you can deadlift, but that's not always possible.
Yep. Okay, so then you would run into some issues with pressing as well. Is that related to your neck, or is that related more to the biceps tendonitis and so forth?
Both, but like my neck. So I've had this injury for probably 15 years, and it's mostly due to like it acts up when I sleep on it wrong. Like I'll wake up the next day and I'll feel my right trap just get really tight. Like it's still you can see me like digging on this chair right now.
Yeah. We're it's like psychosomatic. Like we're kind of triggering all of your same thing. Exactly. Something you talk about your shit. I'll get that too sometimes. Like my neck feels kind of tight now.
Yeah, exactly. So, but so like 2 herniated discs, and just if I sleep on it wrong, get them a little bit out of position, they hit that nerve. Yeah, my right trap gets crazy tight, and then I'll just lose strength on this side. Like over the course of about 6 weeks, I'll usually lose like 25-30% of my strength on this side.
Wow.
And then over the next 6 to 12 weeks, it'll all come back. Has been the trend before. So I'm hoping I'm about 4 weeks into this current aggravation, and I'm hoping it's going to start getting better at some point, because right now it sucks, because I was starting to look at meets again, and now it's acting up, but just is what it is.
So if you're not able to bench press, there's an obvious alternative of dumbbell pressing. Has that worked? Like what have you done to work around? Like, okay, I have to get off the bench for X period of time. Here's what I'm going to do as an alternative.
I still do a little bit of bench, just because it seems to be the sleep that aggravates it, not the bench press. But I'll do more dumbbells, but I'll do a lot of flies actually, because flies. So it's the C6, C7 disc, which is to your right tricep, and so like it's my tricep that's actually weak.
Oh, I see.
And so like if I take the tricep out of it, like flies, there's almost no difference in strength. So I'll do a lot of flies.
How do you like to do? Do you like dumbbell flies, or do you like cable flies, low, high, mid?
Mostly cable.
And do you
mostly
like
cable.
And then where do you like in terms of position? Do you like low? Do you like medium, high?
Usually medium or high.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll just like, my gym's old school. It only has the high one, so I just kind of bend over a little more and
get the
do
angle
it that way.
Yeah.
So because that's going to be, it's not obviously a press, but it's something. You can maintain your hypertrophy, and then hopefully when you come back, it's more just a neural adaptation of getting to learn the movement again.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, I think we've covered a lot. Are there any other tips that you would share for getting through injuries, in terms of, it can be changing your training, or even treatment options that have helped for you?
I'd say, like I said, biggest thing I can say is find a physical therapist and work with them before you get injured.
Yeah.
Identify the movement patterns that are predisposing you to injury before you get injured.
Yep.
And like, I'll say this, but nobody will do it, but because nobody wants to spend the money, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yeah.
So
I'll second that. It's money well spent. I wish I would have worked with this guy. It sounds like the lady that you worked with is even a bit different, which is cool, looking at movement patterns. So yeah, I'll second that. It's not, I think I maybe spent a few $100s max, with this guy, and it helped. And I would still be going. He's in Florida, I'm in Virginia. I'd still be going. I'd see him every week until it wouldn't have to be forever, but I was only able to get in a few sessions with him, and it actually helped markedly. And he gave me a little mobility routine to do that I do now. So I agree that I think I would like to see this, just mobility becoming more popular, but because the problem right now is okay, so if you want to dive into it, you're probably going to end up with becoming a supple leopard. And if you're like most people, you're going to jump into that book and you're going to get confused really quickly. There's a lot of jargon, and it doesn't really. It's kind of just like an encyclopedia. So it doesn't have a prescriptive. Okay, Mr. John or Jane Doe, you're starting weightlifting here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's hard because it is it's very individual. But like that's why I liked the back mechanic. It gives you, okay, well, here's some diagnostic tests you can do on yourself to try and figure out what's going on.
Yep.
And then if you have X, here's these exercises to do.
Yep.
If you have Y, here's these exercises to do.
Yep. Yep.
Seemed to have made a pretty big difference for me.
Yep. And I mean, I'll throw out there, I think with mobility stuff too, you'll know you've hit on something when you should see pretty rapid improvements. I mean, this is me just kind of regurgitating what the physical therapists I've worked with have said, that, within 2 or 3 weeks, you should notice a significant improvement if you've hit on the right thing.
Absolutely. That's been my experience for sure.
Yeah, so it's not something that you're just going to have to grind away for 4 months and then maybe it'll be a little bit better. Like, no, not at all.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's within a few weeks, if you're not seeing some improvement, then they're looking in the wrong spot.
Totally. Okay, great. Well, yeah, I mean, I think that's a pretty comprehensive discussion. Let's end off with, tell us a bit about, so in what do you have, your big push right now is Avatar Nutrition, right?
Yep.
Do you want to tell everybody what that is?
Yeah, so, I've done coaching for years and years. I was an online coach before everybody on Instagram was an online coach.
Literally everybody.
Yeah, literally everybody. Did a show, got third. Here's my online coaching plans.
Yeah. Chicken, oatmeal, and then if you want to get really shredded, tilapia and asparagus.
Yeah. So But what you learn is when you coach one-on-one that there's only so many people you can get to it per unit time.
Sure.
Like when I was just doing coaching, that was 100% of my business. The most people I could handle at any one time was just under 100.
That's a lot of people.
And it was a lot of people. A lot of people. And that was with spreading the updates out over 7 days and all that kind of stuff. And like I enjoyed it, but it was all my time. And it's like, all right, it's very hard to make a difference in the world if you're only working with 100 people at a time. But I wrote articles and I put other stuff out there, but I had the opportunity to basically this guy Mark Springer came to me with this idea. He said, why can't we automate your coaching? Why can't we basically take what you do and put it into a computer system that can predict things and make changes? And I'm like, I don't know how you do that without the human element, but we basically we have now, the original logic was 2 pages long, and now we have something like 50 pages of equations and logic to basically any scenario you can imagine that can come up in coaching. We've pretty much tried to account for it. And
can you tell us a bit more about that? So this is specifically on the diet side of things, right?
Yeah. So basically, if you went to Avatar, what would happen is you'd put in your information, height, weight, sex, kind of your body type, even though that's a little bit. Your body fat
more represents body composition, I'm assuming.
Yeah, you're exactly your body fat. There's a lot of there's probably about a dozen different metrics you're putting in, and then it will generate custom macronutrient recommendations for you, and based on your goal, right? Okay. And so we have 4 different goals you can select from: fat loss, muscle gain, reverse dieting, and maintenance. And each, except for maintenance, the way maintenance works is there's a tolerable range, right? So that's how maintenance works, and it will lower or raise your calories depending on how you're fluctuating.
Yep.
But within reverse dieting, muscle gain, fat loss, there's 4 different levels for every goal, right? So you have, slow fat loss, moderate, fast, extreme. And we try to steer people away from the extreme. But yeah, I mean,
it can be applicable if someone's very overweight, probably, right? If they need to cut their body fat percentage in half just to even get in the gym.
And we try to give a tutorial in that, it says, okay, it's targeting this much weight loss per week, and this is what we recommend, those sorts of things. But yeah, it's even gotten down to, but really where the true value is, it's not really, it's a macro calculator, yes, but there's plenty of those out there.
Exactly.
But it's adaptive to you. So if it found Like, let's say it prescribed you, like, what are your maintenance calories, Mike, would you say?
About 2,800 is my...
So you're pretty average, I would say. Maybe a little bit above average for your weight. But like, let's say the system predicted that, your maintenance calories are 2,200 based on the information you put in. Now, if you know your maintenance calories, there's an option to put them in, and it will override some of the other data that you've entered, right? But if you didn't know, but it was 2,800, and the system predicted 2,200 for whatever reason, you'd probably lose a lot of weight your first week.
Yeah.
And the system
then it would be smart and be like, okay, that was not right, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah. But what happened at first, when we first came out with it, was, we would have too big of fluctuations in numbers, right? Because it would be like, the first week it was targeting 1.5 pounds of fat loss, but they lost 3 pounds. So obviously they're under eating by 750 calories per day. Well, that pound and a half, that could have been water, that could have been a lot of stuff. So we've put in so many constraints on it that it kind of smoothed out a lot of the big fluctuations. Because like muscle gain, for example, like if you're on a slow muscle gain, like a conservative muscle gain trying to limit body fat, I mean, you might be targeting like a 1 pound gain per month.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But within that month, like each week, it might be something like went up 2 pounds, went down a pound and a half, went up another 2 pounds, went down a pound and a half, right? And so if the system was responding so much, like you just end up chasing your tail, right? Yeah. So we had to put so many...
Also, it would make meal planning tough, and
you'd
be constantly reworking and remeasuring food and stuff.
Exactly. So we put a lot of constraints on the system, especially in that first week where a lot of fluctuations can happen. It kind of does that. But like, even like, for example, we spent 3 weeks coming up with a logic for the menstrual cycle for females, because like we had to make it so that when women gained weight on fat loss, because their menstrual cycle, that we could account for that. There's a lot of different things, but it works really well. I'm using it right now, and I document my progress on it. Nice. And I'll even, before I enter my update into Avatar, I'll say, okay, as a coach, I think I would do this in this situation. And pretty much every time it's done exactly what I said it was going to do. Nice. So it's pretty cool to see that. And, at $10 a month, it's a pretty good steal. It's
a lot less than the coach.
Right, exactly.
I mean, some people, I've seen people charging anywhere from, I don't know, $40 to $80 just to give someone macros, which I think is ridiculous. Like, you know what I mean? Just here are your macros. Like, well, there's a calculator. You can do that yourself. You don't need to pay $50 for a one-time, here are macros. Well,
we have some companies that kind of do what we do that are free apps and that sort of thing. But again, what I tell people is, I'm like, okay, well, I didn't write the algorithm. You know what I mean? Like, not to, it was, my partner's, Katie Cole is one of my partners. She's a master's in nutrition and a registered dietitian. So like, you've got two people with a really heavy science background as well as a coaching background, working on this thing and trying to optimize it. So it's a big difference, and like anybody.
That's what I'm saying. It's a lot more than just, hey, here are macros.
Right. Yeah. So
one time as well, and where you go from here is up to you.
Totally. So like, the adjustments make a big difference. We have a Facebook page that's, huge for support.
Nice.
We have full-time customer support staff. So we have 4 full-time customer support, or member success people is what we call them. Daniel, my marketing guy, would get on my ass about calling them customer support if you found that out.
Yeah, we over here it's customer experience.
Yeah. So member success, we call them, and so we're really, we're doing great. Like, we have thousands and thousands of members, and
awesome.
We're like I said, there'll always be a place for personalized coaching, because some people just want that one-on-one experience, and to have somebody who has that nuance to and just the individual support, But
and there also, you can obviously dive more into the nutritional side of things as well if you're working one-on-one in terms of optimizing not just macro but micronutrition as well. Like, people okay, that's great that the macros are where they need to be, but how are you getting these calories, and could that be improved?
Yeah, so we have plans to do a lot of stuff with the system. We're actually right now in the process of redesigning a lot of it and building it back up from the ground floor. But I think it's something that, and our goal is to actually help good coaches. Like, we want to build a coaching
makes sense.
Platform as well. But we want to put the bad ones out of business. So and like I said, at $10 a month, it's really it's a really great option for people who don't have hundreds of dollars to spend on like a high level coach every month.
Yeah.
So.
An app is probably a pretty obvious addition
Yeah,
as well.
we're definitely like, we're going to do apps, like that's being worked on. Yeah. It's a long story, but we had 2 companies screw us out of a lot of money, not do the work.
For apps in particular?
Yeah, and web development. I mean, I don't know what your experience with web development is, but my experience, most web developers are scammers. Like they're really bad.
Yeah, no, it can be bad. I mean, I can share a few things when we're done that might help, but I've gone through some of that shit myself as well.
What we did was we just ended up hiring our own team, and had them on staff, and that's made a huge difference. Like we've had 2 guys that have gotten through way more because they're invested. They're part of the company.
Yeah,
it's not some like.
Essentially, it's your CTO. It's not just like some dude, and
exactly.
It doesn't really give a fuck.
Exactly, and that's what it was. Is people who just didn't give a fuck.
Yep.
They stole probably, God, I don't even want to say it, but $200,000 of our money, if not more, and they charged us for hours they never even worked. Yeah. And then when we went, I don't mind saying the names either. Type 2 Designs in Tampa, fuck you guys. And I can say that because they're getting sued by 4 companies currently. So the really bad sign is that we're not going to get our money back because even if we sued them, like we're not going to get paid. Like we're 5th in line. So but we just kind of were like, well, Frank Sinatra quote, "Best revenge is massive success." So let's just succeed massively. Yep. So that's what we're trying to do.
Cool. And so I assume the URL is avatarnutrition.com.
Yep, you got it.
Okay, great. Well, yeah, I highly recommend everybody go check it out. Again, it's I like that. I like that there's an ongoing element to it. It's because, like you said, there are plenty of macro calculators out there, but they end right there. And then if you want to hire someone to do what Layne's software does, it's going to be a lot more than $10 a month.
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, anything else, Layne, that you want to let everybody know? Any upcoming projects, or is that pretty much that's your?
I also have a member site as well, like on BioLane, which is more completely like educational stuff.
Cool.
I do a webinar every month. It's like $15 a month, and what you get for doing a webinar every month would be worth that in of itself. But we also have articles, we have videos, we have like video series of my comeback and my work, and it's a pretty cool deal. It's a nice compliment. It's not a coaching thing, but it's for people who are a little bit more advanced and really want that next level of knowledge.
Okay, so. And that's biolane.com, right?
Biolane.com, but we do have free articles on there as well.
Cool. Okay. All right, great. Well, that's everything. I thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I think people are going to appreciate the discussion. It touches on a lot of things I get asked about a lot, so that's why I thought it'd be worth getting you on the podcast to go over it.
Absolutely. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.